Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to League Racing TV here for round number 7 of the Esports Masters League Console 1. My name is, of course, Michael Edwards. Going to be taking you through the action here tonight as we take in the Canadian Grand Prix as the Circuit Jules Villeneuve, the venue for tonight's action. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed the week break of which we had through the mid-season part, and of course going into the second half of the season, it is going to be very exciting to see who will come out on top and prevail at the end of the season. Of course, before we get into anything, massive shout out to our sponsors at Ronin Printworks 3D, of course doing some fantastic work, and of course we absolutely appreciate the sponsorship with them. Guys, the second half of the season is amongst us, and we are looking ahead to what should be a very exciting race. But of course, let's have a look at the standings heading into tonight. Of course, CPI lead the championship, 160 points for them as they lead by 23 points to the team in second place in Neverlast Racing. Esports in second place on 137 points. 108 points for GT10. Of course, only 3 teams so far to break the 100-point barrier, but we sure are going to be seeing maybe another 2 teams adding to that. Of course, the team currently in 4th, Visio Racing, EVE on 98 points, and then Optimum Velocity Racing, OVR, they're on 95 points. Very close between EVE and OVR heading into tonight, and not too far ahead of them is GT10. So it'll be very interesting to see how those 3 teams get on with affairs out on track. 69 points for IRT Esports, currently in 6th place with 63 points for FRT in 7th. Very close battle between those 2 teams, as well as recent results for both of those teams have been looking quite promising as they've climbed up in terms of the points standings, but maybe not so much in positions, but they definitely are closing the gap somewhat to the cars up ahead. VMV Esports, they're on 40 points in 8th place with FGE, they're in 9th on 36 points, and then LR, of course, 10th place on, of course, 4 singular points. Looking at the driver lineup here tonight, it is, of course, going to be FGE's Callum and Ollie in the Red Bull Racing cars, with Turbo Toms and Kieran in the LR team. Of course, going to be driving in the Mercedes. I believe Kieran is unfortunately not here tonight, so it is going to be Turbo Toms on his own for LR. Again, as McLaren, of course, coming through, represented by the CPI pairing of Francesco Lago and CPI Finley. The Scuderia Ferraris are the team of which we see the GT10 pairing of Duncan and Mad Dogs. EVE in the Aston Martins with Alpha Kevin and Shut Medal there in the Aston Martins for EVE. OVR in the Alpines with Nassim and Nico there in the Alpines for OVR. In the Williams, the VMV team, the pairing of Clen and Rizzo in the Williams. The RBs for FRT with Nico and NASCAR as the lineup for them here tonight. Nevertheless, Racing in the Sauber with, of course, Tom and Thomas. A very good lineup right there. Tom and Thomas definitely going to be keeping me on my toes with commentating over them. And, of course, IRT in the Haas F1 team with IRT Nick and IRT Brian, as they are going to be the pairing in the Haas here tonight. Guys, of course, we are underway here in qualifying, so let's go ahead and head on over to the action out on track, as we are looking at a very damp qualifying session here in the Circuit Jules Villeneuve, as it is intermediate conditions. Ollie setting the initial first time of a 20.5, so Good going there from Ollie. Glenn struggling a little bit, but there goes Callum even quicker, and Thomas even quicker than that. 16.2 right there from the Neverlast Racing driver, and his teammate in Tom slots in behind. So right now is a front row lockout for Neverlast Racing. It is Tom and Thomas on the front row, or maybe Thomas and Tom, depending on which way you want to go about it. But Turbo Toms and NASCAR splitting the two Neverlast Racing drivers, as well as Medal there for EVE up into P3. As Finley's unfortunately invalidated on his lap. We got Duncan, who's also on an invalidated lap. We got Brian coming down to the final chicane. Of course, the infamous World Champion chicane coming through the final couple of corners now, as Brian to the line. What's it going to be for the IRT man? Up to P3 right there. Very close at the front with the top four drivers, only separated by just over a tenth of a second. Rizzo on the lap. We got Francesco Lago there as the back end steps out on him through sector 1, but a 21.6 in the first sector for Francesco Lago. Of course, a driver that has been in imperious form in Esports Masters League thus far, as Tom improving on his lap time, 16.2. So once again, a Neverlast Racing front row lockout, and this is where things are going to get interesting. Of course, it is a very quick lap, but it's one of them ones where, especially in terms of intermediate running, it's kind of better to just chuck a little bit of extra fuel, do maybe two or three laps now, try and get your eye in as you acclimatise to the conditions, as Francesco Lago through the final chicane, and then of course try to strap on a fresh set towards the end. And Francesco Lago there topping the times, a 16 flat for the CPI man. So up there toppling the Neverlast Racing pairing, as we're still waiting for times to come through from Duncan, Mad Dogs and Finley. And Finley is on the lap right now, as is Mad Dogs, as is Duncan. As it looks like Duncan's going to have Finley not too far behind, going to be getting a little bit of a tow, I think it will be Finley down the back straight, which should help Finley's time. Of course, very interesting, of course, in the intermediate conditions. It's all going to be about who can find the best of the conditions. Of course, it is raining still, but it's not looking massively treacherous in terms of the puddles, but it's still looking very slippery out there. As we got Finley now to the line, what's it going to be for him? And he joins his teammate on the front row, and Turbo Toms for LR puts it on provisional pole. It's a 16 flat for him. He is 16 thousandths of a second quicker than Francesco Lago, and there goes Nico up there. So that is signs that the track is continuously improving and lap times are getting quicker, which is why you're seeing Francesco Lago on a cooldown lap, save up the battery to go again for another lap. And there goes Brian there, improving. Are we going to get to the dry tyres by the end of the session? There is potential there for the dry tyres to come out. Of course, if it does go to dry, it's Francesco Lago there, snapped at the rear end into the wall, but he's still somehow up in sector 1. It's going to be very, very intriguing to see the lap times tumble as we are into the 15s. Now, if it does go to the dry compound tyres, I think it's going to be a case of whoever is the last person to start their lap, they are going to be absolutely loving life in terms of the grip they'll have available to them. But for right now, it is still raining, it is still intermediate conditions, but the track does seem to be getting quicker and quicker. As Francesco Lago now coming down the back straight. Normally you'd have DRS open down here into the final chicane, and of course again on the start finish straight, but not this time. As Francesco Lago improves by 3.5 tenths, goes on a provisional pole, the CPI man, so he finds more time out there. And again, as I mentioned, lap times continuously improving. The conditions are getting better, but for right now, we are not in that window for the crossover to the dry tyres just yet. Of course, around here in Canada, infamously over many seasons in the past, it's been a case of, do you go for the one stop or do you go for the two stop strategy? Of course, sometimes the two stop can be better. You can make a two stop work around you. Of course, the soft tyres historically have been a pretty okay race tyre to be on, and then of course the mediums are the main race tyre to jump onto. So we'll have to see if the drivers are going to be preferring the two stop or maybe the one stop, and I think that variation in terms of the strategy will provide some very interesting racing. Of course, we have a pretty mixed up grid at the moment. Of course, the conditions continuously improving, so we're seeing faster lap times coming through from everyone out on track. As we got Neverlast Racing's Thomas now for the final chicane to the line. He'll come. Is it going to be a new pole position time? No, but he goes up in the P3, as we saw an improved time coming through from, I believe, that was Ollie there for FGE. So Ollie there up in the P6 for him. 7.5 minutes remaining here in qualifying, as is Francesco Lago for CPI taking that pole position point as it currently stands. Brian for IRT up there in P2 on the front row, and that'd be huge for IRT to have both of the drivers close to the front and able to go ahead and try to convert that into some big points for their team here tonight. Of course, everyone, if they're not in the pits, are out on a fresh set of tyres, and it's going to be interesting now as the rain is decreasing. It's still intermediate conditions, and I think it's going to remain intermediate conditions for the remainder of the session, but the track is getting quicker and quicker as the moisture is just getting absolutely chucked up and moved aside by these intermediate tyres, and everyone is trying to find time out there. As we got Finley now coming through towards the final chicane, going to try to keep it out of the World Champions. Got a car up ahead of him who shouldn't be in the way, but you see the back end stepping out on the exit, but Finley to the line. Improved 7/10 improvement there, and it's a 15.4 from CPI Finley, showing that the track is continuously improving out there. As we've got Brian coming through the middle sector now. He was 2 temps down in sector 1. Let's see what the sector 2 split is going to say for him. And he's up by half a tenth right now, as he looks for the best traction possible out of the hairpin, where of course we're going to be seeing some overtaking maneuvers happen in some of these key corners, the hairpin being one of them. Of course, with DRS you are able to make the move down here into the final chicane if you get far enough alongside, as Nick for IRT improves with a 15.3 himself, and there goes Brian with a 10th improvement, and he goes up splitting the CPI appearing. But I believe the main overtaking area, so we're going to be seeing around this circuit, will be of course turn number 1, then with DRS down in towards turn number, I believe it's number 10 or 9 or 10, this chicane right here that we're going through right now with Nico. That'll be another key overtaking position right there, and then of course into the hairpin. You can have a little cheeky lunge down the inside, or you can go for a absolute rally drift, as FRT Nico just did right there into the hairpin. Got good rotation on the spin though, so maybe even though he definitely would have lost time, maybe it's not as horrible as he would have thought. But yeah, he does dive into the pits, as we've got OVR's Nico in the middle sector, and he is marginally down here in the middle sector. As we got around about 4 minutes to go in the session. There's IRT topping the times at the moment, with CPI Finley in second place. Neverlast Racing's Tom there in third, with Brian for IRT in fourth, Francesco Lago for CPI in fifth, and there goes out for Kevin for EVE, improving his lap time. He's up onto the front row alongside IRT Nick. Great lap time there for EVE. Rizzo now looking to try and improve on his lap time as he's coming down to the final chicane. Let's see what the VMV driver can do as he's tenaciously going through the final chicane, gingerly I would say, through the final chicane, but he does find 0.3 of a second almost, and he jumps up ahead of Callum, who is currently on a cool down lap. Meanwhile, we got Glenn out there on a lap as well, as it looks like he is on a flying lap and looking to improve 0.3 up in the first sector, and that is what you want to be seeing. The track continuously improving, and of course the lap times will come down with that. Of course, guys, it has been a fortnight since the last time we went racing here in the Esports Masters League in console tier 1, and of course the race winners last time out was of course a 1-2 for the CPI pairing, with Francesco Lago ahead of Casper in second place, and then we had Max Power there for EVE in P3, and of course a big point haul for CPI. And that man who is currently in P6 right now, Francesco Lago, the man that is leading the charge right here for CPI, of course taking, I believe, 3 wins in a row, and of course his 4th win of the season. I mean, Francesco Lago is absolutely flying out there for CPI, and of course with 3 race wins on the bounce, he scored a lot of points for the CPI team, which is why they are where they are in terms of the championship right now. As we are around about a minute and a half left in the session. We got Jav in the chat saying, "I've missed you, Michael. I have missed you too, Jav, and I have missed the action here in the Esports Masters League." But coming through turn number 2, big snap of oversteer there for Nick as we head towards the break-in for turn number 3 and 4. As we come through there through 5, and he's backed off already before going into turn number 6. But we were going to go on board with someone who's about to begin their flying lap. In fact, we got Brian, who is on a quick lap, as he is 0.2 up in the middle sector. This will be enough to jump him ahead of Finley right now up in the P3, but he wants to find a little bit more time as we have around about 30 seconds remaining in the session. Brian coming down to the final chicane, the infamous World Champion chicane, and through the final corners we'll go, and to the line will come Brian. Is it going to be a new pole position time? No, it is not a new pole position, but he does jump up into P3, 7 thousandths of a second, and there's your new pole position time. It's come in from Neverlast Racing's Thomas, a 15 flat for him, as he sets the new benchmark of the session. And let's see, we have a Scuderia Ferrari as a checker flag has fallen, so we're going to go on board. It's Mad Dogs. Mad Dogs has invalidated his lap time. Unfortunate for him, as we've got Callum, who's also invalidated his run. Who is the next man across the line? Clint has invalidated his run as well. Turbo Tom's on a lap, 0.3 up in the middle sector is the LR man. Through the final chicane he'll go. At one point in the qualifying he was top in the times. He's down in 15th, and he jumps up into P10 as he takes the checker flag. And now we're going to start to see the times coming in quick and fast here, as we got Francesco Lago, who's going to be crossing the line behind his teammate So we're going to see for position changes, and it is Tom for Neverlast Racing going up onto the front row. Finley does not improve his position. Francesco Lago goes up into P3. So Francesco Lago unable to claim pole position here. Alpha Kevin up into P2, splitting the Neverlast Racing drivers, as we've got Nico coming through the final couple of corners now. To the line he'll come. As he comes to the line, Thomas into the pits. His session's over and done with. Nico up into the top 10 for OVR. Ollie invalidated on his lap time. And that is qualifying over and done with. It is Neverlast Racing's Thomas taking pole position ahead of EVE's Alpha Kevin, who will join him on the front row, with Neverlast Racing's Tom and CPI's Francesco Lago sharing the second row together. A fantastic qualifying session from IRT with P5 and P7 here in qualifying. Fantastic from them. And you can see the track was beginning to get drier and drier, but it just wasn't close enough for the crossover. But let's go ahead and run you through the order here of qualifying. It is Neverlast Racing's Thomas who takes pole position ahead of Alpha Kevin in second place. Tom there in third with Francesco Lago in fourth. Nick in fifth with Duncan in sixth. Brian in eighth, seventh, and Finley in eighth. Ninth is OVR, Nico, and Nassim. They rounded out the top 10. Outside the top 10, we had Medal, Nico, Ollie, Turbo Toms, Glenn, Mad Dogs, Rizzo, Callum, and NASCAR rounding out the back of the field. Wow. What a qualifying session that was. Of course, very frantic. The conditions continuously improving over the course of that qualifying session, and we just kept seeing the times fall to the point where we didn't know who was going to get pole position, but it was Neverlast Racing who do get that pole position and that pole position point as well. So they are going to be happy to be picking that up. Of course, a reminder of the point system here in the Esports Masters League. It is a point for pole position, a point for the fastest lap of the race, 22 points for the race win, 18 points for second place, 15 points for the final spot on the podium in P3, 12 points for fourth place, 11 points for fifth, going down in increments of 1 all the way down to P15, where you pick up one singular point. And of course 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th and 20th, no points unless you can pick up the fastest lap of the race. Of course, as we wait to get the lobby sorted out again, a quick reminder of the championship standings coming into tonight. Of course, CPI came in with the lead of 23 points. That gap now is 22 points, with Neverlast Racing picking up the pole position point. So 22 points is the gap, and of course that is a race victory here in Esports Masters League. Of course, GT10 in P3 with EVE in P4 on 98 points, 10 points of GT10. And then, of course, OVR just 3 points behind EVE. So 13 points separating third and fifth. Very close between those three teams. IRT have come here tonight, I think, to play, as they had two very good qualifying results for both of their drivers here in Canada, and of course that puts them in a good position to try and pull away from FRT here tonight, and maybe try to close in on the likes of OVR, the likes of EVE, and perhaps GT10, as they are currently sat in 6th place on 69 points, and then of course FRT on 63 points in 7th, VMV on 40 points in 8th, FGE in 9th on, of course, 36 points, and then, of course, Legacy Racing LR in 10th place, looking to get some more points on the board, as they currently sit 10th on 4 points. Of course, guys, as we are about to go ahead and get the lobby restarted to get to the action out on track, we will be back after this short intermission. But until then, guys, we'll see you on the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back here as we are about to get into the racing action around the fantastic Canadian circuit, the circuit Jules Villeneuve, where of course we've seen so many incredible races. Of course, who can ever forget that incredible drive in 2011 from Jenson Button where he took victory. Who can remember, I believe, is it 2017 or 2018? Sebastian Vettel being handed a 5-second time penalty, which meant that he lost the race win to Lewis Hamilton, taking that number 2 board from in front of where his car was and putting it in front of Hamilton's car, and then taking the number 1 and putting it where his car should have been. But yeah, so many incredible moments around the Canadian circuit in real life as well as in league racing and esports racing in general, as we have seen so many fantastic races that have gone on in the past. Of course, guys, again, massive shout out to our sponsors here in the Esports Masters League with Ronin Printworks 3D. Of course, they do a fantastic work in designing 3D models of steering wheels, etc., etc. Well, guys, looking at the weather out on track at the moment, it's not looking promising if you are one of the drivers out on track. If you're one of the 19, it is not looking too promising. And I'll show you exactly what I mean right now. As we look at the clouds, it's very overcast out there. And there's definitely the possibility of some wet weather to come into play here. Of course, we saw the conditions in qualifying. It was intermediate conditions throughout. However, it was beginning to dry towards the end of the session. So we saw the lap times getting quicker as the drivers not only found more confidence on the drying track, but also just the natural grip just started to ramp up as well. Of course, the drivers out there now are going to be making sure that they have their setups and race strategies sorted. In terms of the strategy, it's going to be a very interesting one. Will we see anyone risk a 2-stop versus the 1-stop? That's going to be the question. Like, there's always that balance around here at Canada where you either go for the 1-stop or you go for the 2-stop, because the difference isn't massive in terms of that particular strategy. I mean, historically, it's never been that. Like, I don't know, guys. I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see. We're really gonna have to wait and see. But guys, let me know in the chat right now, who is your predictions for the race win? Who's going to be on the podium? And how many people are we going to see in the Wall of Champions? How many victims will that corner claim here tonight? Let me know your predictions in the chat right now. I am not going to lie, guys. I looking at the pit lane right now, my eyes are drawn to the one fan that is up there in the grandstands, fist pumping in the air. Like, does everyone else see him? Like, he is absolutely loving life. But we're gonna go into the 5 red lights as the lights are out and we are underway here at the Circuit Jules Villeneuve. 35 laps of racing for the spectators here tonight, and of course a very good start there from Thomas, Kevin and Tom. Francesco Lago obviously holding on to P4 as Finley tries it down the inside of Nick, on Duncan, as Nick up there in P5. Brian already losing a spot to Finley, as I believe that might be Medal that's taking a bit of a tumble. No, it's actually Callum that is taking a tumble down there towards the back. Virtual safety car deployed on lap number 1 hard tyres for everyone out on track. So I think everyone going for the one stop here. So it is going to be all about the pure pace that you have. Everyone's on the same tyre. No one's got any grip tyre advantage at this point. It is all going to be about the pit stop phase and when you're going to go. You see the predicted pit stop strategy right there? There's a possible 2-stop. There is the 1-stop. As we wait to go back to green flag racing once again. Nevertheless Racing currently P1 and P3. EV's Alpha Kevin currently splitting them in P2. Francesco Lago currently in P4 with IRT's Nick in P5. Duncan for GT10 in P6. Finley for CPI in P7 as we go back to green flag racing on lap 2 of 35. As Francesco Lago, fantastic restart from him, side by side through the chicane, and unfortunately for Francesco Lago, backs out of it. I think a little bit of contact, but he tries to outbrake. Oh, a bit too hot on the brakes was Francesco Lago right there. Taps the rear tyres of Tom, trying to outbrake Nick there, and it just did not work out for Francesco Lago as the CPI man. Maybe a little bit frustrated after going side by side through the chicane, getting a little bit out of shape, allowed Nick to get the move done. Maybe Francesco Lago just kind of having to reset and just breathe after that incident. But side by side with IRT, Nick now as Alpha. Kevin up ahead, overtakes Thomas for the race lead as you guys saw up the road. Francesco Lago gets back through on Nick, so he's back up into P4. Finley all over the back of Duncan here for P6 in this race, and of course contact from behind on Finley. Was that Brian? Was that Nico? It was one of the two outbreaking themselves, going into the back of the CPI man, and heartbreak there. Front wing damage, are we seeing any on the OVR or the Haas? There we go, yep. Nico right there with front wing damage. OVR Nico going to be struggling now, and Finley all the way down the order in P11 as he overtakes Nico up into P11. He goes Turbo Tom's up into P12. Wow. No wing damage there for Brian, so looks like the cause of the contact was Nico possibly outbreaking himself, trying to make an overtaking maneuver on IRT Brian, but a little too hot on the brakes, hits the back of CPI Finley, and around goes Finley, and wing damage for Nico. Heartbreak there for him, as the guys at the front now, the top 6, have a bit of a breathing room now of 1.2 seconds to the back from Duncan down to Nassim there in P7 as Francesco Lago 3-second time penalty already on lap number 4. This is not the Francesco Lago that we are used to seeing here in the Esports Masters League. Of course, he's been so proficient, so absolutely like pinpoint on it, race after race over the past 3 races. He's picked up the race victory for CPI. He's picked up 4 race victories so far this season, and tonight he's the first man to pick up a 3-second time penalty. Francesco Lago, maybe this is just not a good track from him, but definitely CPI now under pressure early on with Finley down in 11th. Francesco Lago picking up a 3-second time penalty already. As Nassim has done exactly what he needed to do, he's got backward in DRS range on Duncan up ahead. So the Welshman going well for OVR. And of course it does feel good to say that the Welshman is doing well, as we've not been doing well lately. Rugby, terrible. I mean, it was terrible. But Alpha Kevin doing well also, currently out in front, holding on to the race lead. Thomas not going to risk nothing down into the chicane, and he's going to sit back and wait for his opportunity to strike. And of course his opportunity will come through, and it will be a little bit of a tap at the rear as Francesco Lago actually tried to get the overtake done on Tom, as Nick also with a time penalty to his name now, as we should be seeing with DRS everyone bunching back up again, as you see the flash of the battery as Alpha Kevin there not using any deployment. Thomas goes through. Will Tom try to follow him through? No, Tom's going to sit in behind, and Francesco Lago now sticking onto the back of Tom. Nick still going strong in P5, Duncan there in P6, Nassim now on the back in P7, FRT Nico in P8, and then just floating around the DRS range is of course Brian there for IRT in P9. As we see a big puff of smoke. Oh, Brian getting all out of shape, and that might just cost him because he's just dropped outside of that 1 second. And now CPI Finley can sense his opportunity to go for this overtake, to get it done. He's on the ERS. He'll have the DRS as we come down the back straight in towards the War of Champions chicane, but Finley's going to be ahead before the break-in. Meanwhile, up at the front, you saw Alpha Karen getting the overtake done on Thomas as well. So Alpha Karen back into the race lead. Ollie there with a 3-second time penalty for his efforts out there on track. As we have 3 drivers with time penalties to their name thus far. Francesco Lago being the big shock in terms of the time penalty for him, and of course Nick in P5 also with a time penalty, and of course Ollie down in 13th place also with a time penalty. Of course 4 drivers have made pit stops in this race thus far. Of course Callum and NASCAR early on making pit stops, and of course Nico and Clean also making a pit stop nice and early as well for them. Support in the chat for Never Last Racing coming through from Will, as Thomas with DRS going to get the overtake done on Alpha Kevin, as now it may be the opportunity for Tom in Never Last Racing to try and follow his teammate through as he looks down the inside. Oh, hot on the brake goes Tom, and oh, contact with Francesco Lago. They both make contact, and both of them falling down the order. A heartbreak for the pair of them, but you saw Tom locking up, almost careering into his teammate, and in rejoining the track makes contact with the CPI driver of Francesco Lago as both of them take a spin, but Tom falling all the way down to P13. Francesco Lago now behind his teammate in this race, but my oh my, as Will says in the chat, oh dear indeed, as now it's going to be interesting now for the rest of this first stint, with Finley and Francesco Lago along with Tom having to try and get themselves back into this race. Of course, for Finley and Francesco Lago, both of them have gone for spins early on, neither to the fault of their own for that matter. Of course, Finley got tagged around from behind by, I believe it was OVR's Nico, and of course the incident we just saw moments ago between Tom and Francesco Lago, they of course hindering both of the CPI drivers in this race. They've got to try and come back through this field. If you're Never Last Racing's Tom, you've got to put that mistake out of your mind now and focus up on trying to get yourself back into this race, as IRT's Nick has somehow made the overtake work on Alpha Karen. Up into P2 goes the IRT man now, as he is now the man who is looking to try to take the race lead. As you see Duncan all over the back of Alpha Kevin here. EVE versus GT10 versus OVR right here in the battle for third place. As you see Nick with the DRS gets the move done on Thomas. Up into the race lead goes the IRT man, as it looks like everything is going to be staying as it is for the time being. Turbo Tom's not pressuring for a overtake on Medal up ahead, so he's going to sit in behind the EVE man for the time being. As NASCAR gets through on Callum for 16th place. Ollie with a 3-second time penalty, and I believe that's the second one of the evening thus far. In terms of for Tom now, of course he's outside of DRS, and that is not good for Tom. He's 2.5 seconds off the back of Ollie, and Ollie's on the back of this train. So we have got to see what kind of battling goes on in this race, as the switcheroo there from the CPI drivers. Francesco Lago up into P7, Finley now into P8, as an opportunity there possibly open for Brian and IRT. But speaking of IRT, he's just been re-overtaken his teammate in Nick, re-overtaken for the race lead by Nevertheless Racing's Thomas, and potentially could get done by Alpha Kevin here, who is having a little peek down the inside but isn't going to go for it. And after seeing how Tom got it wrong when he tried to outbrake and go down the inside, I think that was a wise call from Alpha Kevin in this race. Meanwhile, we got a DRS train all the way down to P12 in this race. Tom trying to recover his race. He's in P13. If I'm Tom, I am thinking about the undercut. That is what I'm thinking of, because you're not going to be able to keep up with the train when they got DRS on each other. As we got Duncan and Nassim side by side, and the Welshman gets the job done on the GT10 driver, as we come down the back straight to head into the final chicane again, as we look to get on to lap 12 of 35. Nick leads the way for IRT ahead of Nevertheless Racing's Thomas in second place, Alpha Kevin there in third, Nassim now for OVR in fourth, Duncan down into fifth place, Nico currently in sixth for FRT, and then of course we got the CPI pairing of Francesco Lago and Finley in 7th and 8th, trying to get themselves back into contention. In the chat, Casper is in the chat saying Francesco damaged. Visually it doesn't look like it's damaged, but of course possibility that he may have some wing damage. In fact, no, he's missing an end plate. Yes, you are correct there. Eagle eye there from Casper, and I'm sure he was getting the info fed to him. But Francesco Lago with wing damage will be struggling now aerodynamically versus the rest of the people around him. But it has not been the kind of race that we're used to seeing from Francesco Lago. Of course, going for the an overtake where he got it wrong. He got away with it, but he got it wrong, and then picking up a 3-second time penalty, and then obviously the incident between himself and Nevertheless Racing's Tom, and now the wing damage is just. It seems like this race might just be one of those races where Francesco Lago is thinking about just trying to get through this race. As we got Tropic in the chat saying hello, how are you doing, Tropic? How are you doing? Back up towards the front, we have IRT's Nick leading the way. He does have a penalty to his name, but he won't be leading on track for much longer. FRT, Nigo and Finley battling in behind. We're going to stay on board right now though with the battle for the race lead. As here comes Thomas straight through with DRS, as simple as you like. And now it's going to be about, can Alpha Kevin follow him through? As Alpha Kevin with DRS is going to close in. Is he going to think about the lunge? No, he is not. Alpha Kevin going to sit in behind the EVE man, playing it cool, calm and collected for the time being. As it looks like Thomas, poor exit for him out of the turn 2, and that has allowed Nick back through. And maybe that was tactics from Thomas in this race, because he is quite low on his battery compared to those around him. Around about 20% worse off, and now he's got it back up to 100. So now this is exactly what Thomas needs. Nick trying to burn a bit of fuel, ERS up ahead as we go through the hairpin at turn number 10, and now onto the back straight. If I am Thomas, I am not using any battery, and he's not, and actually he did use a dab of the ERS battery. He gets through, up into P1 goes Thomas, and now is he going to begin to use the battery to try and pull away? No, he's not. He's going to play it smart, save the battery, control the pace. That's what Thomas is going to try to do for right now. Both of the CPI drivers trying to carve their way back through the field. Francesco Lago wounded, wing damage on that McLaren, not ideal for him. Meanwhile, for Neverlast Racing's Tom, with no DRS to help him after the incident he had with Francesco Lago, we saw him fall down the order into 13th. The gap has only continued to increase with the lack of DRS for him. And of course, with 3 DRS straights, one of course down the start finish straight, one down in towards turn number 8, and of course one on the back straight. As a little bit of contact there between Nico and Nassim, and that's going to leave Nassim open for potentially Duncan to try to get through, but Finley gets through on Nico. Up into P6 goes the CPI man. The race lead has changed again. Nick back ahead of Tom as we begin lap 16 of 35. Nick leads away. Neverlast Racing's Thomas in second place. Alpha Kevin for EVE in third. OVR's Nassim there in fourth. Duncan for GT10 in 5th. CPI's Finley in 6th place. FRT Nico in 7th. CPI Francesco Lago in 8th. Brian for IRT in 9th. And Turbo Toms in the top 10 for LR. And of course we got EV's Medal in 11th. FGE's only in 12th. GT10 Mad Dog in 13th. Neverlast Racing's Tom in 14th after being overtaken by Mad Dog, I believe, moments ago, and he's going to try to get that position back. Is Tom here momentarily as they catch onto the back of Ollie as well. So we're going to have a nice little freeway battle for P12 soon, but Tom currently in 14th place and Rizzo in that final points paying position in 15th place for the time being. Up at the front though, here comes Thomas. So Neverlast Racing into the race lead. He'll go. Ollie with another 3-second time penalty. I believe that's 9 seconds now for the FGE man as Tom gets himself through on Mad Dog up into P13. Unlucky for some, but not for Tom as he gets that overtake done and dusted. Top 3 bunching up again as Alpha Kevin closing in on Nick, who's equally closing in on Thomas here. And I wouldn't be surprised if we potentially see a double overtaking opportunity for Alpha Kevin. But in behind, Nassim and Duncan side by side on the exit. We're going to go on board with this battle as Duncan gets the better traction out of the corner, and Nassim just going to sit in behind We've got Finley just sitting in as well as FRT Nico. Everyone just waiting for an opportunity. Meadow with a 3-second time penalty. As here comes Alpha Karen and he's forcing Thomas to have a little peek down the inside. Just throw him off line onto the marbles, off the racing line, and just forcing him to put the pressure on Nick to force a mistake from, if not one of them, both of them. Finley now with a time penalty to his name. He's in P6. Of course, his teammate also with a time penalty to his name as well. Francisco Lago in P8 with wing damage, I want to add as well. Wing damage, still missing the front right end plate. As Francisco Lago down the inside of FRT Nico for 7th place, and unfortunately I think with the lack of wing that Francesco Lago has, it's going to be difficult for Francesco Lago to find these overtaking maneuvers, especially with everyone in a DRS string. It's great for the recovery for Francesco Lago, because once the pit stops happen, I know we're going to be seeing a front wing change for the CPI driver, but for right now, a very good job is being done by Francesco Lago in this race. As Ollie, Mad Dogs and Tom in a bit of no man's land. Tom actually dropping off the back of the two in front, and I'm not sure what that is all about, but yeah, Tom seems to, since that incident with Francesco Lago, Tom just seems to have gone in his own world, as Brian has gone around on the exit of the hairpin as we approach turn 11. Brian's gone around. He's down to 14th place. Ollie's back up in the 11th now, ahead of Mad Dogs. And Turbo Tom's is around. Turbo Tom, so LR around. And he's going to fall down the order now, as he is overtaken by Ollie, Mad Dogs and Tom. All the way down to P14 goes the IRT man. Not what him or the IRT team would be hoping for in this race. They want both of their drivers up there towards the front. Right now, you got Nick up there. He's towards the front, but he does have a time penalty to his name. As Alpha Kevin now in P2 on track. NASCAR picking up a 3-second time penalty. Currently down in 17th place is the FRT man. Nick obviously having to concede that position to Alpha Kevin's moments ago. Alpha Kevin now back through into the race lead for the first time in a fair few laps. It's been a while since Alpha Kevin led as we cross the start finish line to begin lap 21. Alpha Kevin now back into the race lead, ahead of Thomas in second place, and then Nick in third with Duncan in fourth. Nassim there in fifth place. The Welshman, the OVR driver, currently doing a fantastic job for OVR, and we'll have to see what the future will hold for OVR in this race. The question mark has been put in for rain. There's potential. Not seeing any droplets out there on track at the moment, but we'll monitor it and keep an eye out, because it has gone overcast again. Moments ago, a few laps back, we did see that the sun was starting to peep through, as it's all gone a little bit pear-shaped at the hairpin, as Nassim, Nick and Duncan getting all tangled up with each other. That's allowed Nassim to get through on Duncan and Finley to get through on Duncan now. And it looks like Finley might try to maybe set something up down in towards turn number 1 here. So we're going to stay on board with the CPI man. And here's the thing. If it is going to rain, it makes sense why every single person in the grid started on a set of the hard compound tyres. That does now make sense. There is 100% rain coming, otherwise people would have pitted already through to mediums. Yes, I was about to bring that up, Dirk. So we have passed that moment just a little bit. But Thomas leading the way from Alpha Kevin in second place, Nick there in third. We are going to be expecting rain, confirmed in the chat that rain is obviously incoming with the overcast that we are seeing right now. It's just a question of when. Duncan and Francisco Lago battling out there for P6, and here comes the CPI man through up into P6 with the wing damage. Fantastic there from Francesco Lago. Of course, Dirk questioning what has happened with Francesco Lago. Of course, an incident happened earlier on between Neverlast Racing's Tom and Francesco Lago, saw both of them tumble down the order, and then somehow wing damage happened for the CPI driver, and since then Francesco Lago has just been going about the race trying to stay within this train, and I think I may have just saw droplets there, as I believe we might have the first droplets of rain coming down. Yes, it does look like we got rain. Yes, there it is. We have the rain. The rain is beginning to fall now. Nassim and the pressure from CPI Finley. We are now in the phase of the race where it's going to get very treacherous out there on track, especially on those curbs. As the rain begins to fall, the track begins to lose grip for the slicks. As you see Nick getting out of shape as he almost careers into the back of Alpha Kevin's. Alpha Kevin's now down into P3. Nassim now in P4 as Nico and Duncan side by side on the exit of turn 2 as the FRT man gets ahead of the GT10 man. Up into P7 goes Nico in this race. My oh my indeed. And now this is where things are going to get very interesting, especially from a CPI perspective, as Nassim big snap on the exit and falls down 2 positions as they come through turn 7. The snap at the rear for Nassim costing positions on both CPI drivers. And what I was going to say is this is going to be interesting now on what is going to happen between these two drivers, because there's going to be one optimum lap to pit for the intermediates, and it looks like Finley has given the ground to Francesco Lago, but Francesco Lago has wing damage, so Finley's going to have to stay out an extra lap as Alpha Kevin's into the pit lane. He thinks is right now the crossover point. Let's see as we see the gap between NASCAR and Callum, and that is coming down. The gap between NASCAR and Callum is coming down. It is still DRS activated at this moment in time, but we are seeing the intermediates begin to come alive here. 1.3 the gap, and that potentially could be down to the lack of wing for Callum here, but let's have a look at this gap now between Alpha Kerens and Ollie. This is a telling gap right here. In fact, let's have a look at the gap to the leader, and let's see. Yeah, Alpha Kevin is closing in, and that is front wing loss there for Ollie in P8, and that is a lot of front wing loss for Ollie, as the gap is 17 seconds between Alpha Kevin and Nick, who is in the race lead. And Thomas, somehow, while we was looking at the intermediates and how they were performing, Thomas has gone from the race lead down to what was P3 momentarily. He's into the pits now. Nick's into the pits. Francesco Lago into the pits. Finley's into the pits. And Finley is going to be hung out to dry here on this lap, as the front wing hasn't been repaired on Francesco Lago. No front wing repair for the CPI driver, as Alpha Kerens will go through into the race lead. And in fact, we're going to see just by how much, as here comes the likes of Nassim into the fray, as well as FRT's Nico there. Finley though, after the double stack, down in 9th place. And you got Francesco Lago, did not change the front wing. Now, I thought the front wing would have been changed, but no wing change there for the CPI driver. And now it's about, if you are penalty free, you got to keep it penalty free, as there's a lot of drivers out there on track that could gain massively through no time penalties to be awarded to them. Right now, Tom is within the penalty of Finley and would be able to jump ahead of the CPI driver if the gap remains as it is. Right now, if it was to end like this with the time penalties applied, Alpha Kevin of course would take the race win, and then of course it would be Thomas in second place, and I think I want to say yes, it would be Nick in third. So Nick right now is still holding on to a podium position, even though the 3-second time penalty is still there. Right now, Duncan just a little bit too far off. There is DRS disabled here. Lap 27 of 35 is now officially too wet for the dry tyres. In the chat, Casper saying really fast crossover. Yeah, absolutely, a very quick crossover from the dries to the intermediate tyres. Finley with a second 3-second time penalty, and that is not good for CPI. Right now, he is going to lose potentially 3 spots here in this race, as he will drop behind Tom. He could drop behind Turbo Toms, as well as Mad Dog as well. So, I mean, a heartbreak for Finley, as apologies guys for coughing. What we can do though is look at the fastest lap of the race, because that is not going to get beaten now for the remainder of this race. So the fastest lap of the race point will go to FRT, with Nico doing a 10.9, as he's currently up in P6. Time penalty to his name as well, but FRT going to pick up a point for the fastest lap here. It's not going to get beaten, so they can already celebrate that point right there. But who's going to be getting all 22 points for the race win? Ollie with a 3-second time penalty, another 3-second time penalty for him, and right now being in our final points paying position, as Thomas tries to outbrake, sends one on the inside. Alpha Kerens a little bit hot on the brakes, a little bit of contact made between the pair of them, as Thomas now through up into P2 and in the net race lead with the time penalty up ahead. Of course, in the chat, Casper of course saying a bit of a push to pass there. Yeah, it was definitely one I think that Alpha Kevin might feel some type of way about, that is for sure, and maybe something that may go into the stewards at the end of this race, or maybe not here, as Alpha Kevin's going to get the run on Thomas. No, he's going to back out of it, but you're seeing the intermediate conditions really causing a little bit of havoc for the drivers now, as it looks like Nick for IRT beginning to try to pull away. And if Thomas or Neverlast Racing continues to struggle like this, it's going to allow Nick to get ahead and potentially pull the gap that he needs to secure him maybe an extra position or two. As Francesco Lago down the inside of Nassim here. Nassim going to hold it around the outside. Contact between the pair of them as they both look for the traction. It's going to be Francesco Lago though that will pick up that position. Up in the P4 now goes to CPI driver as Nassim, they will hold on to P5 for the time being, but Francesco Lago with the wing damage doing a very good job for CPI here. Of course, no DRS now. It has been deactivated for the past few laps. Intermediate conditions out on track, and it is continuously raining. In fact, the rain looks like it potentially is slowing down. So maybe the rain might stop soon, and I don't think it would warrant the change back to the dries, but you never know. We saw how quickly it went from the dry tyres to the wet, and it could go vice versa as well. As in some of the corners, it does look like it's still raining quite decently, but it's also looking like it's slowing down in areas. As Francesco Lago now ahead of Alpha Kerins. We didn't see that overtake happen, unfortunately, but Alpha Kevin is going to try to challenge Francesco Lago. Francesco Lago now up in the P3 on track, 1.7 off the back of Thomas. And right now, Nick is holding on to a P2 finish here, but getting onto the curb like that is not going to be ideal for the IRT driver, who is going to be reeled in if he does that a bit too much. Of course, Nick 9 tenths ahead of Thomas. Thomas with no penalties to his name though, which is the big thing going for the Neverlast Racing man, as we got Clint and Callum into the pits retiring from the session in totality. 2 retirees, no safety cars other than a virtual safety car we had at the start of the race. No full course safety cars. Lap 31 of 35. Nick leads the way, 3-second time penalty for him. Thomas in second place, no time penalties for him. Francesco Lago in P3 with wing damage. I want to add that, with wing damage, P3 with a time penalty to Francesco's name. Alpha Kevin losing time to Francesco Lago here. 1.1 is the gap, but no penalties for Alpha Kevin. Duncan all over the back of Nassim, as is Nico all over the back of Duncan, because Duncan just made the overtake work up into P6. The GT10 driver went, and here comes the FRT man down the inside, sends it. Potential switchback here from Duncan, not looking good there for Duncan to try and get away through, as we have a question about the penalty situation here. Of course, we will show the penalties. So we got 3 seconds for Nick, 3 seconds for Francesco Lago, 6 seconds for Nassim, as Brindley sends one on the inside of Duncan down in towards turn number 6 and 7, and that is Duncan holding on to P7 ahead of Finley. But again, we'll run through 6 seconds for Nassim in 5th place, 3 seconds for FRT Nico in 6th, 6 seconds for CPI Finley and Medal in 8th and 9th, 6 seconds for Brian in 13th, 21 seconds for Ollie in 14th, going to be nearing disqualification is Ollie, and of course 3 seconds for NASCAR there at the back, as looks like that is honestly is treacherous out there now, and possibly getting to that point where the Inters are not really the tyre you want to be on. Possibly could be leaning more towards the crossover between the Inters and the Wets right now, as you're seeing some puddles begin to form, as the track right now has escalated quite considerably over the previous few laps. But IRT Nick still leading out on track. One mistake from Tom, and there it is. There's the mistake. Tom and Thomas are going confused. I apologise. I think this is what Never Last Racing wanted to do to me. I have Tom and Thomas for me to get confused by. But yeah, Tom with a 3-second time penalty for him in P10. And that, honestly, I thought for a second then it was Never Last Racing's Thomas that picked up the 3-second time penalty. But no, it was the other Never Last Racing driver of Tom. Confusing me, the Never Last Racing drivers are. But Nick, right now in P1 on track, has the 3-second gap to Alpha Kevin. If Thomas picks himself up a 3-second time penalty in the remaining 2 laps that we have in this race, then Nick is on course for IRT's first race win of the season here in Console 1. And what a race to do it at, in a absolutely drenched end to the Canadian Grand Prix. As look at this track now. In my opinion, this track has completely exploded. The crossover right now is incredible. You're seeing the Thomas is really struggling in these corners, and he's getting all out of shape, and that could allow Francesco Lago to close up to Thomas. But 1.2 now, the gap between Nick and Thomas. If Nick can somehow pull away from Thomas by 3 seconds, Nick will take victory here, and Francesco Lago is going to battle. Francesco Lago has the gap to Alpha Kevin now. Oh, now this is going to get interesting here as Nico down the inside of Duncan into the hairpin as we are about to come on to the final lap of the race. 1.5 seconds the gap between Nick and Thomas. Thomas is struggling. Francesco Lago currently in a podium position in this race, even with the time penalty to Francesco's name. Alpha Kevin, 3-second time penalty, and that's it now. The podium is secured for Francesco Lago in this race as Duncan and Nassim trading positions as Nico follows Duncan through as they all try their best to get through turns 1 and 2, absolutely pushing each other through. Contact a little bit on the exit between Nassim and Finley in P7 and P8. Back up towards the front. 2.4 is the gap for IRT Nick. Are we going to see potentially Nick take victory for IRT here tonight? As Francesco Lago flew up into P2 in the race, but Francesco Lago, of course, with the time penalty, will fall behind Thomas, so Thomas isn't going to mind that too much. But that gap right now, I think it is close to the 3-second limit. We gotta have a look at this. We really need to have a look at this. 2.8 the gap. 3 seconds is the gap right there. Nick is on course to take victory here for IRT on the final lap. Coming down to the final chicane for the final time. The IRT driver, 3 seconds of time penalties to Nick's name as he slides through the final corner to the line now. It will be Nick to take victory here in Canada, and it will be Thomas in P2, Francesco Lago in P3, and it'll be Duncan that will go up into P4 ahead of Alpha Kevin in P5, Nico in P6, Tom climbs up the positions in P7, Medal in P8, Nassim P9, and Finley rounding out the top 10. Turbo Toms for LR gets some more points on the board for the LR team, and they'll be absolutely loving life in the LR garage, that is for sure. Mad Dogs there in 12th place, Brian for IRT in 13th, as Rizzo will get 14th place ahead of Ollie. And will Ollie drop out of the points altogether? Yes, Ollie will, as Nico jumps up into 15th place, and I believe NASCAR now crossing the line will jump ahead of Ollie as well. And Bumpier in the chat, the man, the myth, the legend from IRT, obviously overjoyed with Nick's performance here tonight, who takes a victory for IRT here in Canada. Wow. What a race, guys. What a race. It looked like it was all going to be going the way of Neverlast Racing and Thomas there. And when the weather came, once the weather started to intensify to get even more closer to that wet weather crossover period where you switch onto the wet tyres, Nick able to handle the conditions. Thomas, though, missing out on less than 700 of a second. But it is IRT Nick who takes victory ahead of Thomas in second place in Neverlast Racing. Francesco Lago completing the podium for CPI. Duncan there in fourth with Alpha Kevin in fifth. Nico in fifth. Tom in seventh. Medal in eighth. Nassim in ninth. And Finley running out the top 10. Outside the top 10 we got Turbo Toms, Mad Dog, Brian, Rizzo, Nico taking that final point paying position. And then of course NASCAR, Ollie, the last of the finishers, and then our two DNS were Glenn and Callum. Fastest lap of the race going to FRT Nico with a good result for them in sixth place as well. Wow. Honestly, an incredible performance from Nick in that race for IRT. And a huge result for them and a boost for them in the hopes of trying to close in the gap on the teams ahead in the teams championship. Of course, a quick reminder of the championship standings before coming into tonight. Of course, it was CPI who led the way coming into tonight, 160 points. And then, of course, Neverlast Racing, they did get the pole position point, did Neverlast Racing. So it was 138 points for them as we went to the 5 red lights. GT10 on 108 points with EVE on 98 points, OVR on 95 points, and then IRT were in 6th place on 69 points, looking to close in on the teams above and maybe try to put a bit more breathing room between themselves and FRT in behind. Of course, 6 points was the gap coming in tonight. It's definitely increased with that result from Nick here tonight. VMV in 8th place on 40 points. FGE on 36 points. LR 4 points that they came into tonight's race, so, and they are going to be walking away with a few extra points as well. Of course, a reminder of the point system as well. If you guys didn't know, it was 22 points for the race win, 18 points for second, 15 points for third, 12 points for fourth, 11 points for fifth, and then it goes down in increments of 1 all the way to P15, where it is 1 singular point. There's a point for pole position as well as the fastest lap. Of course, Neverlast Racing did get the pole position point, and of course FRT will take the fastest lap point here tonight. And the next race on the calendar, guys, where we'll be heading to next, round number 8, sees us head just south of the Canadian border as we are going to head to Vegas. Is Viva Las Vegas next week, as the drivers are going to be making sure that they have a car tailor-made for that Las Vegas strip, because DRS extremely powerful around that circuit. And it's also a race of attrition where you need to keep it out of the walls. It's so easily done to just nip one of the walls on the exit of some of the corners. The curbs are an absolute nightmare as well around Vegas. So it will be interesting to see how the drivers do get on with that. But that is next week, the 19th of March. We will be in Las Vegas for the first of 2 trips to America this season. Of course, we will be heading to Texas for the Circuit of the Americas for round number 11 later on in the season. But yeah, we are back, and in the second half of the Esports Masters League season, round number 7 at the Canadian Grand Prix has been won by IRT, by Nick. An incredible result from him. And we look forward to seeing what Vegas will hold next week for round number 8. Before we go, a massive shout out to our sponsors again at Ronin Printworks 3D, where of course they make 3D models, including models for steering wheels as well. So make sure you guys have a little look at some of the work that those guys do over there. But guys, that has been it for the action here tonight. I have been Michael Edwards, and we'll catch you next week for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. But what a race Canada treated us to. Until next week, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.